The first battle is often won before the first soldier arrives. Not by a tank rolling through smoke, not by a missile crossing a black sky, not by a drone watching from above. It is won by fuel that is already close enough to matter, by ammunition already waiting inside a guarded depot, by spare parts labeled, tracked, and ready before the first emergency meeting begins. A modern army does not begin with a gunshot. It begins with a question so boring that most people ignore it until everything depends on the answer. Can the force get there, stay there, and keep fighting after the first week? Because a tank without fuel is not a weapon, it is a steel statue. A helicopter without parts is not air power. It is expensive metal waiting for permission to matter. A brigade without food, water, generators, batteries, mechanics, medical support, transport routes, and repair crews is not a fighting force. It is a countdown. Somewhere far from the front line, inside ports, warehouses, rail yards, contracts, databases, loading plans, and quiet planning rooms, the shape of the war is already being decided. This is Battletech Declassified. Modern Warfare Explained. Tonight, we are not starting with the explosion. We are starting with the thing that decides whether the explosion can continue. Logistics, the invisible system behind every visible act of military power. The bloodstream of the army, the hidden machinery that turns national will into movement, movement into presence, and presence into combat power. This is the story of how U.S. Army logistics can win wars before combat starts, through strategic prepositioning, through LOGCAP, through supply chain warfare, and through the new world of artificial intelligence and autonomous resupply. By the end, you will understand why the most important weapon on a battlefield is not always the platform with the biggest cannon. Sometimes it is the warehouse filled 6 months early. Sometimes it is the contractor who builds the base before the brigade arrives. Sometimes it is the supply route the enemy cannot break. And sometimes the most decisive battle is not fought over a city, a bridge, or a hill. It is fought over time itself. Most people imagine war as a collision, steel against steel, aircraft cutting across the sky, drones circling above a target, missiles rising from launchers, armored vehicles grinding through mud. But war is not just a collision. War is a system under pressure. Every system has a hidden side. In civilian life, you see the supermarket shelf, not the farms, ships, trucks, warehouses, refrigeration systems, software, fuel prices, and workers that place food there. The shelf feels simple because the machine behind it is invisible. The U.S. Army works the same way. What the viewer sees is the soldier, the vehicle, the aircraft, the missile, the dramatic moment at the edge of danger. What they do not see is the chain of decisions and deliveries that made that moment possible. Every armored formation has a ghost army behind it. Mechanics, fuel handlers, transportation units, medical teams, engineers, port operators, contract managers, supply specialists, data systems, civilians, allies, host nation infrastructure. Every one of them is part of the fight before the first shot is fired. That is why logistics matters. Modern war is not only about who has the best weapons, it is about who can keep those weapons alive after reality starts chewing on them. The first day of war is expensive. The second day is harder. The 10th day reveals the truth. A force can look terrifying in a parade and still collapse when the supply chain breaks. It can have advanced sensors, long-range fires, armored formations, and elite troops, but if fuel does not arrive, the system slows. If repair parts do not arrive, vehicles pile up behind the line. If ammunition use outruns delivery, firepower becomes a memory. If ports are blocked, rail lines are damaged, airfields are overloaded, and data systems are disrupted, the army begins to fight not only the enemy, but friction itself. Logistics is the quiet war against friction. It is the art of keeping the body moving while the battlefield is trying to cut its veins. Once you see that, the whole map changes. This episode sits inside a bigger idea: decision advantage. Usually, when people hear that phrase, they imagine command centers, satellites, drones, sensor fusion, artificial intelligence, and commanders making decisions faster than the enemy. That is part of it. But decision advantage is not only about seeing faster and shooting faster. it is also about being ready faster. If one side spends the first 2 weeks searching for equipment, building a base, arranging transport, requesting fuel, locating spare parts, coordinating contractors, and negotiating access, while the other side already has equipment in theater, the second side is not just more prepared, it has already stolen time. In military strategy, stolen time becomes freedom. Freedom to reinforce. Freedom to deter. Freedom to choose routes. Freedom to sustain pressure. Freedom to recover after losses. A commander with logistics options has more choices than a commander waiting on a port schedule. Think of it like chess, but not the clean chessboard people imagine. In normal chess, both players start with the same pieces in the same places. Real war is not like that. Real war begins with some pieces already forward, some stuck at sea, some needing maintenance, some waiting for fuel, some blocked by politics, and some sitting inside a warehouse that nobody can open fast enough. Strategic logistics is the art of arranging the board before the match begins. Army preposition stocks are part of that. LOGCAP is part of that. Sustainment planning is part of that. Supply chain defense is part of that. Modern artificial intelligence and autonomy are becoming part of that. The Army does not only ask, how do we win the battle? It asks, how do we make sure the battle can be fought at all? That question sounds less cinematic, but it is the foundation under every cinematic moment. If the foundation cracks, the rest of the story falls with it. The thesis of this episode is simple. The U.S. Army does not just move soldiers into war. It moves the conditions that make war possible. That means it must move mass, not just people. It must move fuel, munitions, tools, repair parts, food, water, communications gear, engineering equipment, medical supplies, bridging assets, power generation, shelter, and the administrative machinery needed to keep everything accountable. It must also move trust. Trust that a unit will not be stranded. Trust that a commander can plan beyond first contact. Trust that allies can receive forces. Trust that contractors can build what is needed. Trust that the supply picture is accurate enough to guide decisions. In war, trust is not a feeling. It is built out of inventory, transport capacity, maintenance discipline, infrastructure, security, and time. Tonight, we move through the hidden structure behind military power. First, why logistics determines wars. Second, strategic prepositioning, the art of placing equipment ahead of the crisis. Third, LOGCAP, the strange but powerful world of outsourced war logistics. Fourth, the supply chain as a target, because the enemy has also learned where the bloodstream runs. Fifth, modern logistics through artificial intelligence and autonomy, where the Army tries to see its own system before the enemy disrupts it. Sixth, the limits of logistical dominance, because no system is invincible. And finally, the deeper lesson of this episode, the side that thinks ahead does not merely react to war. It shapes the opening moves. But here is the uncomfortable part. The same network that gives the U.S. Army reach also creates a huge surface area. Ports can be watched. Depots can be mapped. Contractors can be targeted. Data can be corrupted. Fuel convoys can be tracked. The more powerful the logistics machine becomes, the more important it becomes to defend the machine itself. Why logistics determines wars. Start with the simplest truth. An army eats before it shoots. That sounds almost too basic to matter, but the basics are where reality hides. A soldier can be brave, trained, disciplined, and well-equipped, but courage does not replace water. Training does not replace calories. Discipline does not replace sleep. A rifle does not replace medical care. A unit that cannot rest, eat, wash, treat casualties, charge batteries, repair gear, and receive orders will degrade even if the enemy never lands a direct hit. Combat power is not just the number of weapons in a formation. Combat power is the ability to keep using those weapons under stress. It is the difference between a force that looks strong on paper and a force that remains strong after days of movement, confusion, weather, damage, uncertainty, and exhaustion. A modern brigade is like a moving city with weapons. It consumes. It produces waste. It needs electricity. It needs traffic control. It needs maintenance. It needs medical support. It needs communications. It needs food. It needs fuel. It needs people whose job is not to be dramatic, but to keep the dramatic parts alive. This is why logistics determines wars. Not because logistics is more glamorous than combat, but because combat is temporary without it. Imagine a Formula One car with the best driver in the world, but no pit crew, no tires, no fuel, no engineers, and no spare parts. For one lap, maybe talent survives. For the race, the system collapses. War is not one lap. War is an entire season driven in bad weather, with the opponent trying to burn the garage, confuse the radio, damage the track, and cut off the fuel. Logistics is the pit crew that keeps the machine in the race. Without it, even the best fighters become passengers inside a system that has stopped moving. Fuel is the blood of modern war. It is easy to forget this because fuel does not look like strategy. It does not have the drama of a missile launch or the mystery of a stealth aircraft. It sits in tanks, trucks, pipes, bladders, cans, generators, and logistics reports. But fuel turns military intention into physical motion. Armored vehicles drink it, trucks drink it, helicopters drink it, generators drink it, forward bases drink it, communications nodes, refrigeration units, radar systems, maintenance sites, and water purification equipment all depend on energy. A force that runs low on fuel does not simply slow down, it begins to lose options. It cannot reposition as freely. It cannot keep generators running with confidence. It cannot evacuate as flexibly. It cannot push forward without asking whether it can return. Fuel changes the psychology of command. That is why attacking fuel is so tempting. The enemy does not have to defeat every tank if the tank cannot move. The enemy does not have to destroy every aircraft if the aircraft cannot be supported. A fuel convoy is not just a line of trucks. It is future maneuver stored in liquid form. It is the next advance, the next generator cycle, the next evacuation route, the next defensive repositioning. In this sense, a fuel truck can be more strategic than it looks. It may appear soft compared with an armored vehicle, but what it carries is mobility itself. This is the cruel mathematics of logistics. The front line is where the world pays attention, but the sustainment line is where endurance is created. When fuel flows, commanders can act. When fuel stops, commanders start negotiating with distance, time, and fear. Once a force begins to conserve movement because it does not trust resupply, the enemy has already changed the battle without winning a single dramatic engagement. Munitions are tempo in physical form. A weapon system is only as powerful as its ability to keep firing when demand arrives. This becomes especially important in high-intensity conflict, where expenditure rates can become shocking. Missiles, artillery rounds, air defense interceptors, small arms ammunition, rockets, mortar rounds, and precision munitions do not appear by magic at the point of need. They are manufactured, stored, transported, tracked, secured, distributed, and consumed. Every shot creates a future logistics task. Every volley is a promise the supply chain must keep. If that chain cannot keep up, the force enters a dangerous zone, where tactical decisions are shaped by scarcity. The question becomes not only, what target should we hit? It becomes, what can we afford to shoot? And when will the next shipment arrive? Think of a printer that can print 100 pages per minute, but only has 20 sheets of paper. Technically, it is fast. Practically, it stops almost immediately. Firepower works the same way. A unit may have advanced weapons, trained crews, and excellent targeting. But if ammunition resupply is slow, uncertain, or vulnerable, then firepower becomes rationed. Rationed firepower changes behavior. Commanders may delay fires, units may hold back, defenders may conserve interceptors, attackers may avoid opportunities because they cannot guarantee follow-up. This is why logistics shapes operational tempo. Tempo is not just how quickly forces move, it is how quickly they can move, shoot, reload, repair, and repeat. The repeat is the part that matters. Anyone can look powerful in the first exchange. The deeper question is who still has ammunition, maintenance, fuel, and coordination after the battlefield becomes hungry. Logistics is what feeds that hunger. Without it, the gun may still exist, but the rhythm dies. Maintenance is hidden combat power. It is the part of the war that rarely gets cinematic lighting, but quietly decides what percentage of a force is actually usable. A tank in a brochure is not the same as a tank that can start, move, communicate, fire, survive weather, cross terrain, and return for another mission. Vehicles break, tracks wear down, tires fail, engines overheat, sensors glitch, batteries die, weapons need servicing, dust enters systems, mud damages movement, cold changes performance, heat punishes electronics. Human crews make mistakes under exhaustion. War does not only destroy equipment through enemy action, war consumes equipment through use. The battlefield is a giant machine for turning readiness into maintenance requirements. This is why a mechanic can become as important as a gunner, not because the mechanic replaces the fight, but because the mechanic returns assets to the fight. Readiness is not a static number. It is a living condition. A formation that begins with many vehicles can shrink quickly if repair capacity, spare parts, recovery vehicles, diagnostic tools, and trained maintainers are not available. Once equipment piles up in need of repair, combat power begins to leak away. The unit still exists on a chart, but the real force on the ground is smaller. This creates a strange kind of invisibility. The enemy may look at a unit and assume it has a certain power. The commander may know the truth is weaker. Logistics is the bridge between paper strength and real strength. Maintenance is one of its strongest pillars. A well-maintained army can absorb damage and keep returning to the fight. A poorly sustained force becomes a museum of broken promises, expensive systems waiting for parts that arrive too late. Time is the secret currency of logistics. Every delay has a cost. Every missing part creates a pause. Every congested port creates a ripple. Every overloaded route becomes a bottleneck. Every convoy that waits for security loses hours that cannot be recovered. A commander may want speed, but speed must be supplied. If the tactical plan moves faster than the logistics plan, the force stretches like a rubber band. At first, it feels flexible. Then it snaps. This is why the most dangerous moment for a military operation is often not the first movement, but the point where the force outruns its support. History is filled with armies that advanced beautifully until fuel, food, weather, terrain, and distance began to argue back. Distance is not empty space. Distance is a logistics tax. The U.S. Army's advantage has often come from treating distance as an engineering problem before it becomes a crisis. Ports, airfields, rail networks, road movement, host nation support, prepositioned stocks, contract support, and sustainment units all exist to reduce the tax that distance imposes. This is not just about moving stuff. It is about buying decision time. If supplies arrive faster, commanders decide with more confidence. If repairs happen faster, units re-enter the fight sooner. If fuel distribution is reliable, maneuvers can be planned with less hesitation. If medical evacuation and treatment networks function, leaders can take calculated risks, knowing casualties will not simply vanish into chaos. Time is not only measured by clocks. In war, time is measured by how long a unit can keep acting before the system behind it fails. Logistics extends that clock. It lets a force breathe longer, push farther, recover faster, and force the enemy to solve a harder problem. This is why logistics becomes doctrine. Doctrine is not just a book of ideas. It is the military's way of turning experience into repeatable behavior. When the Army treats sustainment as a warfighting function, it is saying something serious. It is saying that logistics is not an afterthought added after the plan is finished. Logistics is part of the plan from the beginning. The route matters, the port matters, the bridge matters, the fuel point matters, the maintenance window matters, the medical chain matters. The contractor support matters. The data system matters. The warehouse location matters. If any of these pieces fail, the operation may still begin, but it may not endure. And endurance is where many wars become real. A battlefield is like a campfire in harsh weather. The visible flame is combat. It is bright, hot, and dramatic. But the flame only survives if someone keeps feeding it. Wood must be gathered. Air must reach it. Rain must be managed. The fire must be protected from wind. If the supply stops, the flame shrinks, then flickers, then dies. Logistics is the act of feeding the fire without letting the enemy see exactly where the woodpile is. That is why modern military planners think in terms of operational reach, endurance, and freedom of action. Operational reach means how far a force can go and still function. Endurance means how long it can keep going. freedom of action, means how many choices it still has when the enemy pushes back. Logistics strengthens all three, but the Army does not wait for the fire to start before gathering wood. It tries to place the wood closer to the fire before the storm arrives. That brings us to strategic prepositioning. Strategic prepositioning. The basic idea is simple. Do not wait until a crisis begins to move everything from the United States. Put key equipment, vehicles, supplies, and support packages closer to possible crisis areas before the crisis becomes urgent. That is what Army prepositioned stocks are designed to do. In plain language, it is like placing emergency equipment near the place where an emergency might happen. You do not buy a fire extinguisher after the kitchen is already burning. You place it ahead of time because speed matters most when there is no time left. For the Army, prepositioning can mean equipment on land, equipment at key sites, and in some cases, stocks positioned at sea. The purpose is not just storage, the purpose is response. The power of prepositioning is that it separates people from heavy equipment. Soldiers can move by air faster than tanks, trucks, and large support packages can move by sea. If a unit's equipment is already closer to the theater, the Army can reduce the time between political decision and military presence. That time matters. It matters for deterrence because a potential enemy sees that the United States does not have to start from zero. It matters for allies because reinforcement becomes more believable. It matters for commanders because early options are not trapped inside shipping timelines. But prepositioning is not magic. A warehouse full of equipment does not automatically become combat power. The equipment must be maintained. It must be secure. It must be accessible. It must be matched with arriving units. It must move from storage to the right place at the right time. Prepositioning buys time, but only if the system behind it can turn stored mass into usable force before the window closes. Prepositioning is really a fight against the clock. In a crisis, time compresses. Political leaders want options. Commanders want forces. Allies want visible reassurance. Adversaries look for hesitation. Shipping routes become crowded. Ports become critical. Airfields become busy. Every hour matters, because the opening phase of a conflict can shape everything that follows. If equipment has to cross an ocean after the crisis starts, the Army is asking distance for permission. Strategic prepositioning changes that relationship. It says, some of the distance has already been paid for. Some of the mass is already forward. Some of the problem has already been solved before panic begins. That is why this is more than storage. It is a way of moving future time into the present. Imagine two firefighters. One has a truck, hose, water, protective gear, and maps ready outside the station. The other must first order the hose, borrow the truck, locate the water source, and check if the road is open. Both may be brave, both may be trained, but only one can arrive in time to matter. Prepositioning is the Army's version of having the truck loaded. But here is where the story becomes more complicated. The enemy can also read the map. If stocks are placed forward, they may become targets. If depots are known, they may be watched. If ports are essential, they may be threatened. If rail lines are needed, they may be disrupted. Prepositioning reduces one risk, distance, but introduces another, exposure. This is the constant tension in military logistics. Bring supplies closer, and they are faster to use. Keep them farther away, and they may be safer, but slower. The art is knowing where to place the weight before the crisis reveals which choice was right. Europe shows why strategic logistics is also geography. On a map, Europe can look compact compared with the Pacific, but military movement across Europe is still a serious engineering problem. Ports matter. Rail gauges matter. Bridges matter. Road weight limits matter. Border procedures matter. Fuel networks matter. Host nation support matters. A tank is not just a tank. It is a heavy object that needs roots strong enough to carry it, maintenance points to sustain it, fuel points to feed it, and staging areas where units can assemble without creating chaos. In peacetime, these details can sound administrative. In crisis, they become the difference between a force that flows and a force that jams itself in the doorway. Think of Europe like a military bloodstream. Ports are the major arteries. Railways are long veins carrying heavy equipment inland. Roads are smaller vessels spreading movement into the theater. Depots are organs storing energy and material. Airfields are lungs bringing in people, parts, and speed. If the bloodstream works, combat power can circulate. If it clots, the body weakens. Pre-positioned stocks help because they place mass inside the body before the emergency begins. Instead of pushing everything through one distant pipeline, the Army can draw from forward stocks and connect arriving personnel with equipment closer to the area of need, but the system still has to move. A depot is not the final destination. It is a starting point. Equipment must be issued, checked, fueled, loaded, escorted, and integrated into units. The drama is not only in having the equipment, the drama is in converting stored equipment into motion while everyone else is also moving, watching, waiting, and possibly trying to disrupt the process. Pre-positioning can also exist at sea. Floating stocks sound almost science fiction at first, like warehouses drifting on the ocean, waiting for a crisis. But the logic is practical. If heavy equipment and supplies can be carried aboard ships and positioned closer to potential theaters, then the United States can preserve flexibility without relying entirely on fixed land locations. A ship can move. A ship can reposition. A ship can wait outside a region and then deliver when access becomes possible. In theory, this gives commanders options. It creates a mobile reserve of material. It says the supply chain does not have to begin at a distant homeland port every time. Some of the war's weight can already be on the water. But a floating warehouse is still a warehouse, and the ocean is no longer empty space. It is watched by satellites, aircraft, submarines, drones, long-range missiles, cyber networks, and maritime surveillance systems. A ship full of equipment is valuable, but that value also makes it attractive. It must reach a port. That port must be usable. The cargo must be unloaded. The unloading must be protected. The equipment must then move inland. Every step creates a possible bottleneck. A ship gives mobility, but it does not erase friction. If land prepositioning is like keeping emergency gear near the building, sea-based prepositioning is like keeping emergency gear in a truck that can move between neighborhoods. Useful, flexible, powerful, but still dependent on roads, access, timing, and protection when the emergency starts. That is why prepositioning is never one solution. It is a family of solutions. Land stocks, sea stocks, theater infrastructure, host nation support, transport units, and maintenance networks all form one wider logic. Reduce the time between decision and usable force. There is a dangerous mistake people make when they think about prepositioning. They imagine that having equipment nearby is the same as being ready. It is not. Stored equipment is potential energy. Like a battery, it becomes useful only when connected to the machine. A tank sitting in storage does not automatically create deterrence unless it can be issued, crewed, fueled, armed, maintained, transported, protected, and integrated into a unit. A pallet of supplies does not help a soldier unless it reaches the correct place before the need becomes urgent. A warehouse is not victory. A warehouse is a promise. The entire logistics system is judged by whether it can keep that promise under stress. Think of ordering a package online. The website says it has arrived at a warehouse near your city. That sounds close, but you still do not have it. It must be sorted, loaded, routed, driven, and delivered to your door. If the delivery truck breaks down, the package may be close, but useless. War works the same way, except the package might be a transmission, a missile, a water purification system, or a critical repair part for a vehicle that cannot move without it. This is why reception, staging, onward movement, and integration matter so much. Reception means receiving the force and equipment. Staging means organizing it. Onward movement means sending it where it needs to go. Integration means making it part of the operational force. These words sound dry, but they describe the moment when stored material becomes living combat power. The enemy knows this too. If he cannot destroy the warehouse, he may try to disrupt the delivery. If he cannot stop the ship, he may target the port. If he cannot hit every vehicle, he may attack the road network. The fight is not just over stuff, it is over the handoff. Pre-positioning also sends a message. It is not only a logistics tool, it is a signal. When equipment is forward, allies see commitment. Adversaries see that response may be faster than they hoped. Commanders see more options. Deterrence is not only about saying, "We might respond," it is about making that response physically believable. A promise written in a speech is one thing. Thanks for watching. In the video, a stockpile of vehicles, ammunition, support equipment, and sustainment packages already positioned closer to the crisis is something else. It tells the enemy that the first days may not be empty. It tells allies that reinforcement is not purely theoretical. In that sense, logistics becomes political language. It speaks through weight, location, and readiness. But deterrence only works if the system is credible, if equipment is poorly maintained, if access is uncertain, if movement routes are fragile, if contractors are not ready, if spare parts are missing, or if data about inventory is wrong. Then, the signal weakens. A stockpile must be more than a symbol. It must be usable. This is where logistics becomes a trust problem. The enemy is asking, can they really move? Allies are asking, will they really arrive? Commanders are asking, can I really count on this? The Army's job is to make the answer yes before anyone has to ask in panic. And yet, equipment alone does not build a base, run a dining facility, generate power, purify water, manage waste, repair infrastructure, or support thousands of people living in harsh conditions. Prepositioned stocks can help bring the tools of war closer. But armies also need living systems around those tools. They need places to sleep, eat, repair, refuel, communicate, and recover. That is where LOGCAP enters the story. LOGCAP, the outsourcing of war logistics. LOGCAP stands for Logistics Civil Augmentation Program. The name is bureaucratic, but the idea is simple. When the Army needs large-scale support, especially in places where permanent infrastructure does not already exist, it can use contracted civilian capability to help provide essential logistics and base support. In plain language, LOGCAP helps the Army build and run the back end of military life: food services, water, power, laundry, housing, waste management, construction support, transportation support, maintenance support, base operations, the things that do not look like combat, but without which combat becomes harder, slower, and more fragile. Think of a deployed force as a temporary city under pressure. A city needs water, electricity, food distribution, sanitation, roads, repair crews, sleeping areas, communications, storage, security procedures, and constant management. Now imagine building that city near a conflict zone, under time pressure, with thousands of people arriving, equipment moving, weather changing, threats evolving, and commanders demanding speed. That is not a simple military camp. That is a living organism. LOGCAP exists because the Army cannot afford to have soldiers perform every support function at every scale in every location. Civilian contractors can bring capacity, specialization, equipment, and manpower that help the military focus uniformed personnel on missions only the military can perform. It is not glamorous. It is not usually what people picture when they think about war. But if a base cannot feed people, power systems, handle waste, maintain living conditions, and support operations, the force begins to degrade from the inside. A base is not just where soldiers sleep, it is where combat power is recharged. The reason outsourcing makes sense is focus. Not every military task must be done by a soldier. If a contractor can run a dining facility, maintain generators, manage laundry, build temporary infrastructure, or support base operations, then soldiers can be freed for military tasks that require military training, authority, and risk. This does not make contractors more important than soldiers. It makes them part of the system that keeps soldiers focused. A modern military operation is too complex for every support requirement to be solved with uniformed manpower alone. LOGCAP gives the Army a way to scale faster than organic military units could sometimes do by themselves. It is like adding industrial muscle to the skeleton of the force. But every strength has a shadow. The moment you rely on contracted support, you also create dependencies. Contracts must be managed, performance must be monitored, costs must be controlled. Security must be considered. Contractors must be moved, housed, protected, and integrated into the wider operation. In stable environments, this can be complicated. In contested environments, it becomes even more serious. What happens if the base comes under threat? What happens if supply routes are disrupted? What happens if civilian workers cannot reach the site? What happens if the contractor's own supply chain breaks? What happens if political conditions change? LOGCAP is powerful because it expands capacity, but it does not erase risk. It changes the shape of risk. Instead of only asking, "Do we have enough soldiers for support tasks?" commanders must also ask, "Can the contracted system survive the pressure of the operation?" That question matters because the enemy does not care whether a function is performed by a soldier or a contractor. If it keeps the force alive, it can become a target. A forward base is not a parking lot with tents. It is a living system. Water must come in or be purified. Waste must go out or be managed. Generators must run. Fuel must be stored safely. Food must be delivered, prepared, and served. Vehicles must be repaired. Medical facilities must function. Communications must stay online. People must sleep somewhere. Roads inside the base must handle traffic. Storage areas must be organized. Security must be coordinated. If the base grows, the complexity grows with it. What starts as a staging point can become a small city, and every city has a metabolism. It consumes energy, produces waste, and needs constant care. LOGCAP supports this metabolism. It helps turn an empty patch of ground into a place where military power can live. That is a strange sentence, but it is important. Forces do not just fight from nowhere. They fight from networks of support. A helicopter needs a landing area, fuel, maintenance, parts, crews, planning, and communications. A truck convoy needs routes, loading points, maintenance, drivers, fuel, security, and schedules. Soldiers need food, water, hygiene, shelter, and medical care. If these systems fail, morale drops, health suffers, equipment degrades, and commanders lose tempo. The base becomes a drag instead of a platform. Think of it like a music festival, except instead of bands and food trucks, there are armored vehicles, command posts, fuel points, and security threats. If the toilets fail at a festival, people complain. If sanitation fails in a deployed base, readiness suffers. If power fails, communications and operations may slow. If food systems fail, endurance weakens. LOGCAP's value is that it helps keep the military city alive while the operational force focuses outward. LOGCAP is also a scale tool. Scale matters because war is not only a test of bravery, it is a test of how much organized activity a state can produce and sustain. Moving one unit is hard. Moving many units is harder. Supporting one base is complex. Supporting multiple bases across a theater is a different universe. The Army may need to stand up operations quickly in places where there is no mature U.S. infrastructure waiting. It may need temporary facilities, power generation, water support, food services, transportation, material handling, construction support, and base operations in a short window. LOGCAP gives commanders a mechanism to access large civilian capacity without building every piece inside the uniformed force. It is the military reaching into the industrial world and saying, we need the back end of a city fast. This is where contract management becomes combat power. That phrase sounds strange, almost too administrative for war. But think about it carefully. If a contract enables a base to open faster, aircraft can stage sooner. If a dining facility feeds thousands reliably, soldiers preserve energy. If generators run, command posts stay alive. If water systems function, health and hygiene hold. If transportation support moves supplies across a theater, units remain connected to the resources they need. None of these things look like a firefight, but all of them shape whether the firefight can be sustained. A signature on a contract is not a trigger pull. Yet in the right context, it can decide how quickly a force becomes operational. This is the hidden lesson of LOGCAP. War is not fought by weapons alone. It is fought by systems that allow weapons, people, and decisions to remain useful under pressure. Still, this creates a vulnerability. If the Army depends on a contracted support ecosystem, then that ecosystem must be protected, supervised, and adapted. The contractor is not outside the war. The contractor is inside the bloodstream. The shadow side of LOGCAP is dependency. Every time a military system gains speed through an outside support network, it also gains a new set of things that must keep working. Contractors need their own workers, vehicles, tools, supply chains, communications, security procedures, payments, legal frameworks, and access. They do not appear from nowhere. They are not magic. They are part of a larger civilian and industrial ecosystem that must be connected to the military operation. In a stable environment, that can be manageable. In a contested environment, where drones, cyber attacks, sabotage, political pressure, and long-range fires can reach deeper into the rear, the question becomes sharper. Can the support system survive the same pressure as the force it supports? This does not mean outsourcing is weak. It means outsourcing must be understood clearly. LOGCAP can multiply capacity, but capacity without control becomes confusion. A base that depends on contracted power generation must know what happens if generators fail. A food system that depends on outside delivery must know what happens if routes close. A maintenance arrangement must know where parts come from and how long replacement takes. A transportation contract must still function when the road network becomes dangerous. In war, every convenience has a hidden question attached. What if this stops working? That question is not pessimism. It is realism. A trust-first military system does not pretend that contractors make logistics effortless. It builds redundancy. It monitors performance. It plans alternatives. It understands that the contractor is not outside the war just because the contractor is not wearing a uniform. If their work sustains the force, then their work sits inside the operational bloodstream. And once something enters the bloodstream, the enemy has a reason to study it. LOGCAP becomes decision advantage when it gives commanders more places to operate from, more ways to support forces, and more speed in turning empty terrain into usable military infrastructure. A commander who can open a support site faster has more options. A commander with more options is harder to predict. If one base is threatened, another may absorb the load. If one route is disrupted, another route may become practical. If one staging area becomes crowded, another can be prepared. Logistics is not only about keeping people alive. It is about increasing the number of moves available on the board. A military force with only one supply route, one port, one base, and one repair hub is like a chess player with only one legal move. The enemy does not have to be brilliant. He only has to block the obvious. But as soon as logistics becomes a source of advantage, it also becomes a target. The enemy watches the same system and asks a different question. Where is the bloodstream thinnest? Which port matters most? Which bridge carries the heaviest vehicles? Which contractor site supports the largest base? Which fuel node keeps the operation alive? Which data system tells commanders what they still have? Which convoy route repeats often enough to be predictable? This is the turning point in the story. Logistics is not merely support behind the war. Logistics becomes part of the war. The rear area begins to disappear. The old idea of a safe backline becomes weaker. Satellites look deeper. Drones fly farther. Cyber tools reach into planning systems. Precision weapons turn warehouses into strategic targets. Sabotage can make a bridge more important than a battalion. The enemy does not need to defeat every combat unit if he can slow the system that feeds them. And that brings us to supply chain warfare, where the target is not always the soldier at the front, but the invisible network keeping that soldier in the fight. The supply chain as a target. Modern war has made one thing brutally clear. The rear is no longer as rear as it used to be. There was a time when armies could imagine a front line where danger was concentrated and a back area where logistics could work with relative safety. That idea is fading. Long-range missiles, drones, satellites, cyber operations, electronic warfare, sabotage, special operations, and open-source intelligence have stretched the battlefield backward. A warehouse far from the front may still be visible. A convoy route may still be mapped. A fuel point may still be tracked. A rail hub may still be disrupted. A command system may still be penetrated. The supply chain does not sit outside the fight. It runs through the fight, even when the shooting is far away. Think of a restaurant. The customer sees the meal. The kitchen is hidden behind the wall. But if someone wants to stop the restaurant, they do not have to argue with every waiter or take every plate from every table. They can shut down the kitchen, cut the electricity, block the delivery trucks, poison the inventory list, or stop the water. War works the same way. The front line is the dining room. Logistics is the kitchen. Supply chain warfare is the enemy realizing that the kitchen is easier to disrupt than the soldiers are to defeat. This is why contested logistics matters so much. It means the Army must assume that moving, storing, tracking, repairing, fueling, and distributing supplies will happen under threat, not just under inconvenience, under threat. The enemy may not wait for the force to arrive fully prepared. He may try to break the preparation itself. He may attack the road before the convoy moves. He may corrupt the data before the order is made. He may strike the fuel before the tanks roll. The battle, in other words, begins upstream. A smart enemy does not always attack strength directly. He looks for what strength depends on. If an armored brigade is powerful, what feeds it? If an air defense unit is dangerous, what reloads it? If artillery can fire deep, what supplies the shells? If a command post coordinates movement, what powers it, connects it, and protects it? This is how supply chain warfare changes the logic of combat. The enemy does not have to pierce every armored vehicle. He can make the vehicles wait for fuel. He does not have to destroy every launcher. He can slow the flow of missiles. He does not have to break every unit. He can overload the ports, damage the rail, disrupt the software, and force commanders to spend their attention solving problems behind them. It is like trying to stop a boxer. You can swing at his face, or you can make sure he never gets water, never sleeps, never trains, never receives medical treatment, and never reaches the ring on time. Direct force is only one method. Exhaustion is another. Confusion is another. Delay is another. The supply chain is where delay becomes a weapon. A bridge closed for 12 hours may not sound dramatic until the convoy behind it contains the fuel for tomorrow's maneuver. A port crane damaged at the wrong time may matter more than a destroyed vehicle. A corrupted inventory system may cause units to request what they already have, or fail to request what they desperately need. This is why logistics officers think in networks, not just warehouses. Every node connects to another node. Every route supports a timeline. Every timeline supports a decision. And every decision supports combat power. When the enemy attacks the supply chain, he is not just attacking movement. He is attacking the commander's future choices. Ports are among the most important and vulnerable points in a military supply chain. They are gateways where national power turns into theater power. Heavy equipment moves by sea because ships can carry mass that aircraft cannot. Tanks, trucks, containers, ammunition, engineering equipment, generators, and support vehicles all depend on ports at some stage of the journey, but this creates a choke point. A theater may be thousands of miles wide, but if most of the heavy flow enters through a few key ports, those ports become strategic pressure points. The enemy does not need to cover the whole map. He studies the doors. A port is not just a place where ships stop. It is cranes, berths, roads, rail links, storage yards, customs procedures, security, labor, communications, fuel, scheduling, and traffic management. If any of those pieces fail, throughput slows. Throughput means how much material can pass through the system in a given time. In logistics, throughput is life. A port that can unload 10 ships on paper but only move supplies inland from 2 of them has a hidden bottleneck. A port that can receive equipment but lacks rail capacity becomes a parking lot. A port that is physically intact but cyber disrupted can still become confused. A port that is open but under missile threat may become politically risky to use. This is why military logisticians do not simply ask, "Is there a port?" They ask, "How much can it handle? How fast can it clear cargo? How well can it connect to inland routes? How vulnerable is it? And what happens if it closes?" A 10-lane highway is useless if every vehicle must squeeze through one small toll booth. In war, the toll booth may be a port, a bridge, a rail yard, or a single road junction that suddenly carries the weight of an entire campaign. Cyber turns logistics into a battlefield of invisible errors. Most people think of supply chains as physical things: trucks, containers, ships, warehouses, pallets, fuel hoses, and repair parts. But modern supply chains are also made of information. Where is the fuel? How much ammunition remains? Which vehicles need parts? Which route is open? Which unit has priority? Which contractor is responsible? Which shipment is delayed? Which port can receive the next vessel? Which depot has the right component? All of these questions depend on data. If the data is wrong, late, corrupted, hidden, or manipulated, the physical system begins to behave badly. The trucks may still exist. The fuel may still exist. The supplies may still exist, but the force may no longer know how to connect need with supply. You do not always have to destroy a truck if you can send it to the wrong place. You do not always have to hit a depot if you can convince the system that the depot is empty. You do not always have to block a road if you can make planners believe the road is unsafe or unavailable. This is why cyber operations against logistics can be so dangerous. They can create doubt inside the system. Doubt slows decisions. Slower decisions create delays. Delays create shortages. Shortages create caution. Caution changes operations. And suddenly, an attack that began inside software has shaped movement on the ground. It is like changing the labels in a hospital pharmacy. The medicine may still be there, but if nobody trusts the label, the whole system freezes. Modern logistics runs on trust in information. When commanders trust the data, they can act. When they do not, they must verify, delay, reroute, duplicate, or conserve. The enemy understands this. In supply chain warfare, the target is not only the material, it is the confidence that the material picture is real. Drones have made logistics more visible. That may be one of the most important changes in modern war. A fuel truck used to be vulnerable if the enemy had eyes on it. Now the enemy may have many cheap eyes, flying low, watching roads, hovering near likely routes, or searching for patterns. A convoy that moves at the same time every day becomes a habit. A depot that grows too large becomes a landmark. A generator site creates heat, sound, and traffic. A fuel point attracts vehicles. A repair area gathers damaged equipment. Logistics leaves footprints, and drones are very good at noticing footprints. This changes the value of targets. A tank is obviously dangerous, but a fuel truck may keep 10 tanks moving. A maintenance vehicle may return several systems to action. A communications support truck may keep command links alive. A pallet of air defense missiles may matter more than one launcher if interceptors are running low. In the drone age, soft targets can have hard consequences. That creates a painful dilemma. Logistics must move, but movement can reveal it. Logistics must store, but storage can concentrate it. Logistics must communicate, but communication can expose it. Logistics must deliver, but delivery creates patterns. The old dream of a large, comfortable, efficient rear area becomes harder to maintain when cheap sensors can watch for the signs of life. It is like trying to run a delivery company while someone studies every van from above. The answer is not to stop delivering. The answer is to deliver differently. Smaller loads, more routes, more deception, more camouflage, more movement discipline, more dispersion, more resilience. The supply chain can no longer assume darkness. It must learn to survive in a world where even the quiet truck on a back road may be part of the battle. The new logistics defense is not one shield, it is many habits. Disperse supplies so one strike cannot destroy everything. Use camouflage so important nodes do not stand out. Create decoys so the enemy wastes attention and ammunition. Build redundant routes so one broken bridge does not freeze the entire operation. Move smaller loads more often when massing supplies becomes too risky. Keep mobile stockpiles that can shift before they are targeted. Harden critical nodes when they cannot move. Protect fuel points, repair areas, and command logistics systems as if they are combat assets, because they are. The goal is not to make logistics invisible forever. That is impossible. The goal is to make logistics harder to find, harder to hit, harder to understand, and faster to recover. This is resilience. Resilience does not mean nothing breaks. It means the system keeps functioning after something breaks. A spider web is a useful metaphor. Cut one strand, and the whole web may still hold if enough connections remain. Cut the only rope holding a bridge, and the bridge falls. Modern logistics wants to be more like a web and less like a single rope. But webs are complicated. The more routes, nodes, supply points, contractors, vehicles, stocks, and data streams the Army uses, the harder the system becomes to manage by human instinct alone. A commander cannot simply glance at a map and fully understand fuel status, ammunition burn rates, maintenance demand, route risk, contractor availability, weather impact, port capacity, drone threat, cyber confidence, and unit priority across a theater. The system is too large, too fast, and too connected. That is why the next phase of Army logistics is not just about more trucks or more warehouses. It is about seeing the whole machine in time to act. This is where artificial intelligence and autonomy begin to matter. Modern logistics, artificial intelligence, and autonomy. The promise of artificial intelligence in logistics is not that a machine becomes a general. That is the wrong image. A better image is a dashboard that notices the warning lights before the driver smells smoke. AI can help sift patterns too large for humans to track manually. Fuel consumption, ammunition burn rates, vehicle failures, spare part demand, route delays, inventory gaps, weather effects, maintenance cycles, transportation capacity, port throughput, medical supply usage, contractor performance. These streams can become overwhelming when a force is moving fast under pressure. AI offers the possibility of turning that noise into early warning. Not perfect truth, not magic. Early warning. Imagine a body that could tell you which muscle will cramp tomorrow, which organ needs more oxygen, which wound is starting to infect, and which artery is under stress before the pain fully arrives. That is the dream of predictive sustainment. Instead of waiting for a unit to say, "We are almost out," the system sees the trend earlier. Instead of waiting for a vehicle to fail, the system notices signals that suggest failure is likely. Instead of discovering too late that one route is overloaded, the system identifies pressure building across the network. In logistics, earlier knowledge is power, because supply takes time. If you learn about a shortage only when the shortage is already painful, the supply chain is late. AI matters because logistics is always fighting delay. But AI is only as useful as the data, the processes, and the humans around it. A bad dashboard does not create clarity. It creates false confidence. The future of logistics is not machine replacing human judgment. It is machine-assisted visibility, where humans still decide, but with a wider and faster picture of the system they are trying to control. Predictive logistics is the attempt to send help before the scream. In old logistics, a unit might report a problem after it becomes obvious. Fuel is low, ammunition is low, a vehicle broke. A part is needed, a route is blocked, a generator failed. The system then reacts, but reaction is always late compared with prediction. Predictive logistics tries to read patterns early. If a specific vehicle type usually needs a certain part after a certain number of hours in certain terrain, the system can prepare. If a unit's fuel use is rising faster than expected, the system can adjust delivery. If ammunition expenditure is spiking in one area, the system can warn planners before the stocks become critical. Think of it like weather forecasting. You do not wait until your house is flooding to check whether rain is coming. You watch the clouds, pressure, radar, and wind. Logistics wants the same kind of forecast, but for supply. Where will demand rise? Where will maintenance fail? Where will traffic jam? Where will the next shortage appear? The best supply run is the one that leaves before someone asks in panic. That does not mean prediction will always be right. War is too messy for perfect forecasts. The enemy adapts. Weather shifts. Roads close. Units consume more than expected. Equipment fails in strange ways. Human decisions change the pattern. But even imperfect prediction can be valuable if it gives planners more time. Time lets them reroute, reprioritize, stage supplies, alert contractors, adjust maintenance, and prepare transport. In logistics, being one day early can feel invisible. Nobody celebrates the shortage that never happened. But that is the point. The highest form of logistics success is often silence. The unit keeps moving, the commander keeps deciding, and the crisis that could have stopped everything never fully arrives. Autonomous resupply changes the risk equation. Moving supplies to the front has always been dangerous because supplies must travel through predictable spaces: roads, trails, landing zones, river crossings, staging areas. The closer the delivery gets to the front, the more dangerous the journey becomes. This is sometimes called the last mile, but in war, the last mile may be the hardest mile on Earth. It may be watched by drones, threatened by artillery, blocked by mines, jammed by electronic warfare, or exposed to ambush. Human drivers and crews take real risk every time they move through that space. Autonomy offers a different possibility. If a route is too dangerous for people, perhaps an unmanned system can carry part of the burden. This can mean ground robots carrying ammunition, drones delivering medical supplies, unmanned vehicles moving water, or autonomous systems pushing small loads to dispersed units. The point is not that robots replace logistics. The point is that they may extend it into places where manned delivery is too risky, too slow, or too costly. Think of a dangerous hallway filled with smoke. You might not want to send a person through it first, but you might send a machine carrying a flashlight, a rope, or a small package. Autonomous resupply is similar. It can keep the supply chain breathing when the route becomes deadly. But autonomy also brings new problems. Machines need power. They need navigation. They need communications or onboard decision-making. They can be jammed, hacked, captured, destroyed, or confused by terrain. They may not carry enough mass to solve large-scale sustainment needs. A drone can deliver a critical component, but it cannot replace a full fuel convoy. Autonomy is not a miracle. It is a tool. Its real value may be in reducing risk, increasing options, and keeping small but crucial flows moving when the battlefield becomes too dangerous for traditional methods. The last mile is where elegant logistics plans meet mud, fear, and enemy fire. It is one thing to move supplies across oceans, through ports, along railways, and into theater stockpiles. It is another thing to get the right item to the right unit at the right moment when that unit is moving, hiding, fighting, or under observation. The last mile is not always literally 1 mile. It means the final delivery from the larger supply system to the people who actually need the material. This is where delay becomes personal. The fuel is not abstract anymore. It is the difference between moving and staying. The ammunition is not a statistic anymore. It is the next hour of defense. The medical supply is not inventory anymore. It is a life. A simple civilian analogy helps. Delivering pizza to a city is easy. Delivering pizza to one apartment while the streets are blocked, the address keeps moving, the phones are jammed, and someone is watching the delivery driver from above is a different problem. Military last-mile logistics is that problem with consequences measured in lives and operations. The front does not always have clean roads, clear signs, stable addresses, or safe delivery windows. Units move to avoid detection. Commanders change plans. The enemy interferes. Weather breaks routes. A supply vehicle may have to choose between speed and concealment. A drone delivery may be faster but vulnerable to jamming. A ground robot may be safer for humans but slower. This is why last-mile logistics is where innovation often matters most. Big ships and depots win the theater scale problem. Last-mile systems win the human scale problem. And war needs both. 1 million gallons of fuel in the wrong place is almost useless. 1 5-gallon can at the right moment can restart the machine. Data is becoming a form of logistics fuel. Without good data, the supply chain does not know what to feed, where to send it, or when to move. In older images of war, the logistics officer might be imagined standing over paper maps and stock lists. That still captures part of the spirit, but modern sustainment is increasingly digital. Inventory systems, transportation systems, maintenance records, sensor feeds, route updates, contractor databases, fuel status, and operational priorities all form a data environment. That environment becomes the nervous system of the logistics body. If the bloodstream is fuel and supplies, data is the set of signals telling the bloodstream where to flow. Bad data can be almost as dangerous as no supply. If a system thinks a depot has parts that it does not have, units wait for ghosts. If inventory is undercounted, commanders may ration unnecessarily. If consumption is overestimated, scarce transport may be wasted. If route data is wrong, convoys may move into danger or avoid routes that are actually open. If maintenance records are poor, failures may surprise the force at the worst time. This is why data discipline matters. It sounds boring until the wrong number delays the right shipment. In war, a spreadsheet can become a battlefield if decisions depend on it. The enemy knows this. Cyber attacks, spoof data, disrupted communications, and information overload can all weaken logistics without touching a single pallet. The future fight may include efforts to blind the army to its own supplies. Imagine standing inside a warehouse with the lights off, labels scrambled, and people shouting contradictory instructions. The supplies are there, but the system cannot use them efficiently. Modern logistics therefore needs both physical resilience and data resilience. It must protect the boxes and protect the truth about the boxes. The AI paradox is that artificial intelligence can make logistics faster, but also more dependent on the digital world. That is the trade. If AI helps predict failures, route supplies, prioritize scarce transport, and detect demand patterns, the Army gains speed and clarity. But if commanders begin to depend heavily on those tools, then the tools themselves become part of the battlefield. The data pipelines must be protected. The models must be tested. The outputs must be understood. The humans must know when to trust the machine and when to challenge it. A wrong recommendation delivered with confidence can be more dangerous than an obvious error. It can look like clarity while quietly steering the system in the wrong direction. AI does not remove friction. It relocates friction. Instead of only asking, "Where is the fuel?" the Army must also ask, "Is the data about the fuel accurate?" Instead of only asking, "Which route is open?" it must ask, "Who told us this route is open? And can that information be trusted?" Instead of only asking, "What part will fail next?" it must ask, "Why does the model think that? And what happens if it is wrong?" This does not make AI a bad tool. It makes AI a powerful tool that must be handled with discipline. A compass is useful only if you know it can be affected by metal nearby. A map is useful only if it is current. A dashboard is useful only if the sensors feeding it are honest. The Army's future logistics advantage may come from combining machine speed with human judgment, automated pattern recognition with commander intent, and digital prediction with old-fashioned redundancy. The future supply chain will not be purely human or purely machine. It will be a hybrid organism. And like every organism in war, it must learn how to survive injury. Part 6. The limits of logistical dominance. The United States has enormous logistics strengths, but no supply chain is invincible. That is the first honest point. Scale creates power, but scale also creates complexity. A global military force depends on ports, ships, aircraft, fuel networks, maintenance systems, contractors, allies, databases, roads, railways, communications, and political access. Each element adds capability. Each element also adds a possible point of failure. Weather can close ports. Cyber attacks can slow systems. Drones can watch routes. Missiles can threaten depots. Bureaucracy can delay movement. Local politics can complicate access. Industrial production can struggle to replace munitions quickly enough. Maintenance demand can rise faster than expected. A force can be powerful and still be slowed by the physical reality of moving mass across distance. Logistical dominance does not mean everything is safe. It means the system has more ways to keep moving when things go wrong. That is a very different standard. The goal is not perfection. The goal is recoverability. If one route closes, another opens. If one depot is hit, supplies are not all lost. If one data system fails, commanders still have a usable picture. If contractors cannot support one site, another plan exists. If fuel becomes scarce, priorities are clear. If a port is damaged, alternate entry points are ready. Logistics is not a glass statue that must never crack. It should be more like a living body that can bleed, clot, reroute, heal, and keep functioning. This is why redundancy matters. Redundancy may look inefficient in peacetime because it means having extra options that are not always used. But in war, redundancy is insurance against surprise. A lean supply chain may look beautiful on a spreadsheet until the first missile, storm, hack, or political closure turns efficiency into fragility. The U.S. Army does not operate in a vacuum. Host nations and allies are part of the logistics equation. This is both a strength and a dependency. It is a strength because allies provide geography, infrastructure, local knowledge, access, ports, roads, rail, staging areas, and political legitimacy. A coalition can create a wider and deeper support system than one country operating alone, but it is also a dependency because access must be negotiated, protected, and maintained. A route through an allied country is not just a line on a map. It is a political relationship, a legal framework, a transportation system, a security challenge, and sometimes a public debate. You can own the best truck in the world, but someone still has to open the gate. That is the simple metaphor. Military logistics depends on gates everywhere: port access, airfield access, rail access, border access, road permissions, contractor permissions, fuel agreements, storage sites, movement corridors. In peacetime, these can seem like paperwork. In crisis, paperwork becomes tempo. If approvals are slow, movement slows. If infrastructure is weak, heavy forces struggle. If public opinion shifts, political friction grows. If an ally is threatened, routes may require more protection. This is why exercises, agreements, and relationships matter before the war. They are not ceremonial. They are rehearsals for movement. They help answer practical questions before panic arrives. Can this bridge hold the vehicle? Can this rail network move the load? Who controls this port? How fast can customs procedures be cleared? Where can fuel be stored? Which roads can handle military traffic? The answers may not sound dramatic, but they shape deterrence. A military plan that assumes access without preparing access is not a plan. It is a wish. Logistics turns wishes into routes, permissions, and movement. Modern war is often described as precise, digital, networked, and fast. All of that can be true. But war is still heavy. That is the part people forget. Precision weapons still need production lines, storage, shipping, maintenance, and trained crews. Drones still need batteries, controllers, repair parts, data links, operators, and replacement airframes. Armored vehicles still need fuel, tracks, engines, transmissions, tools, and recovery systems. Soldiers still need food, water, medical care, sleep, and transport. The future may be digital, but war still has weight. It still has mass. It still has friction. It still has broken parts, empty tanks, clogged roads, tired humans, bad weather, and mud. This creates the tension between precision and mass. Precision lets a force do more with less, but it does not remove the need for enough. A single accurate weapon can be powerful, but if the conflict consumes many weapons, production and resupply become decisive. A small number of exquisite systems can deliver stunning effects, but they also create maintenance burdens and replacement problems. A force built only around elegance may struggle when the war becomes a grinding test of endurance. On the other hand, mass without precision can waste resources and expose more targets. The Army must balance both. It needs smart systems and enough material. It needs digital visibility and physical stockpiles. It needs AI forecasts and real trucks. It needs autonomous resupply and old-fashioned fuel distribution. This is why logistics is not becoming less important in advanced war. It is becoming more important. The more sophisticated the force, the more specialized the support. The more connected the system, the more data it needs. The more precise the weapon, the more painful it becomes when the supply runs dry. High-tech war does not escape logistics. It raises the price of getting logistics wrong. The vulnerability of scale is one of the central problems of American military power. The same machine that gives the United States global reach also gives the enemy something enormous to study. Ships, bases, depots, fuel networks, contractors, airlift, sealift, communications, ports, rail hubs, and digital systems all create patterns. Some patterns are unavoidable. Heavy equipment has to move through certain places. Fuel has to be stored somewhere. Aircraft need airfields. Ships need ports. People need bases. Supplies need routes. The larger the system, the more powerful it becomes, but the more signatures it creates. A signature is anything that can be detected, tracked, or understood by the enemy. Heat, movement, radio traffic, financial activity, shipping schedules, satellite imagery, social media clues, repeated convoy timing. Even boredom can create patterns if people repeat convenient habits. The answer is not to become small. The Army cannot supply a major theater with a backpack and a whisper. The answer is to become harder to predict and faster to recover. Break patterns where possible. Hide what must be hidden. Move what should not sit still. Deceive where the enemy expects clarity. Build alternate routes. Keep stocks distributed. Train units to operate with less when necessary. Protect the data layer. Assume the enemy is watching. Assume the first plan will be disrupted. This is the mature view of logistical dominance. It is not a fantasy where American supply lines move untouched across the world. It is a contest where every advantage must be defended, every route may be challenged, and every node must justify its risk. Logistics wins before combat starts only if it has been built for the world that actually exists, not the world planners wish existed. The modern battlefield is too transparent, too fast, and too connected for lazy logistics. The quiet machine must now learn how to fight for its own survival. The conclusion is not that logistics is more important than combat. The conclusion is that combat without logistics is temporary. Logistics is what makes strategy real. It turns plans into movement. It turns movement into presence. It turns presence into pressure. It turns pressure into sustained operations. Strategic prepositioning buys time. LOGCAP buys scale. Supply chain defense buys survival. Artificial intelligence buys earlier warning. Autonomy buys new delivery options in dangerous spaces. Allies and host nations buy access. Maintenance buys tomorrow. Fuel buys movement. Munitions buy tempo. Data buys confidence. Put together, these pieces form the hidden architecture behind the visible battlefield. So when we ask how U.S. Army logistics wins wars before combat starts, the answer is not one thing. It is a sequence of advantages built early, equipment placed before the crisis, contracts prepared before the base exists, routes studied before the convoy moves, ports assessed before the ship arrives, fuel planned before the maneuver begins, repair capacity positioned before vehicles break, data systems trained before confusion spreads. The force that does this well does not merely arrive, it arrives with a system behind it, and that system changes the enemy's calculation. An adversary looking at a U.S. response must ask, how fast can they reinforce? How long can they stay? How hard is their supply chain to break? How many routes do they have? How much is already forward? How quickly can they recover? Deterrence lives inside those questions. A force that can arrive quickly, sustain itself, and absorb disruption is harder to intimidate. It does not need to promise strength with words alone. Its logistics speaks before the first shot. But this story also leaves us with a darker thought. If logistics is the bloodstream of the Army, then the next generation of warfare will keep looking for ways to poison, slow, confuse, or cut that bloodstream. The enemy may not attack the strongest unit first. He may attack the decision system that tells supplies where to go. He may not attack the tank. He may attack the fuel forecast. He may not attack the artillery. He may attack the port that unloads the shells. He may not attack the command post. He may attack the contractor network that keeps the base running. Future war may be decided not only by who sees the battlefield faster, but by who sees their own supply chain clearly enough to keep it alive under pressure. That is why logistics belongs inside the story of decision advantage. The side that moves information faster can decide faster. But the side that moves fuel, munitions, parts, people, and support faster can act on those decisions. A perfect decision with no fuel is just a thought. A brilliant plan with no ammunition is just a briefing. A powerful force with no sustainment is a storm that burns out too soon. The U.S. Army's logistical strength is not that it has eliminated friction. Nobody eliminates friction in war. Its strength is that it has spent decades building systems to fight friction at scale. Prepositioned stocks, contracted support, theater sustainment, data networks, maintenance systems, transport capacity, allied infrastructure, and now AI and autonomy. But every system that creates power also creates a new target, which leads to the next question in this season. If logistics decides whether the force can arrive and endure, what happens when artificial intelligence begins predicting the war before the commander can see it? That is where decision advantage becomes even stranger. Not just faster movement, not just faster supply, but a battlefield where the winner may be the side that sees tomorrow's shortage, tomorrow's route failure, and tomorrow's opening before the enemy realizes today has changed.